Hello, this is Professor LeBron. Today we're going to be going through New York State landscapes. Last lesson we learned about topography in general, but today we're going to look specifically at New York State landscapes. Okay, so our learning target today is I can determine the landscapes and compositions of New York State. Okay, so let's get into that. Okay, so you want to make sure you have your notes open to the side, that notes document, and you're going to be filling in the words in red. Okay, so here's our first term for today, landscape. A landscape is a region or an area that is characterized by elevation, slope, and bedrock structure. Okay, so it's determined by elevation, slope, and bedrock structure. Landscapes are formed or shaped by both uplift, which is mountain building, and erosional agents such as gravity, wind, water, and ice. Okay, so landscapes are shaped by the building of mountains and erosion. Right, so take a moment to fill in those red words in your notes, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so New York State has three different types of landscapes. So landscapes with high elevation are called highlands or mountains. Moderate elevations are called uplands or plateaus. And low elevation landscapes are called lowlands or plains. Okay, so here we have a picture representation. All right, so the mountains have high elevation. The plateau are kind of in the middle. And then the plains have the lowest elevation. Okay, so this is an example of landscapes we would see in New York State. So take a moment to write down the words in red, and then we'll move on. Okay, so here's some examples of what these three different landscapes would look like in real life. Here is a mountain. Here is an example of a plateau on the side over here. And here is an example of plains or flat, low elevation areas. Okay. So now we're going to watch a video on different types of landforms. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at the video questions. Okay, so here are our 5 video questions. Number 1, how does the geosphere change shape? 2, what is a mountain and how is it formed? 3, in what 2 ways can plateaus be formed? 4, what do all deserts have in common? And our last question, 5, what is the difference between a delta and an island? Okay, so you're going to be watching a video and looking for the responses to this question in the video. The video is in the next slide. All right, so you're going to take a moment to play this, and you're going to answer those video questions based on this video. Okay, so you can do that in your own time. All right, now I'm going to move on to the next part of the lesson. So we already talked about landscapes and the 3 different types that are in New York State. Now we're going to take a look at drainage patterns. Okay, so what a drainage pattern is this just the way that water leaves the surface of a landform, and it depends on its shape. Okay, so it's the way the water leaves the surface of a landform depends on the shape of that landform. Okay, take a moment to write that word in red in your notes, and we'll continue. All right. So here is an example of a dendritic drainage pattern. Water runs off a flat inclined plane in lines that join together to form a large stream. Okay, so there's probably a slight hill or a change in elevation here. The water drains down and joins into a larger stream. Okay, so here's an example of what it looks in real life here. So it's a bunch of little branches of water coming down to form a larger stream. Okay, moving on. Our second type of drainage pattern is a radial drainage pattern, and that's when water runs off in a circular pattern around a high point. Okay, as shown here. So there's a central higher point, and the water is going to run down from there in different directions. Okay, make sure you're writing down the words in red as well. Okay, on to our third drainage pattern, which is an annular drainage pattern. So the water runs off in concentric circles shown here around an eroded layer dome. Okay, so if we see here, the water seems to drain in a circular pattern around a dome. Okay, and our last drainage pattern is rectangular, which is interesting. So water runs off in parallel valleys that are formed by layers of tilted rock or fault. Okay, if you see in this picture, they kind of flow out from the center. Right, so that's an example of what a rectangular drainage pattern would look like. Okay, so today we're going to learn about using page 2 and page 3 of the reference table a little bit more. So let's take a look at page 2 of the Earth Science reference table. Okay, so page 2 is just showing different landscape regions of New York State. So remember, we have 3 different types of landscapes. We have mountains, plateaus, and lowlands, as shown here. Okay, we have all of the 3 different types that are in New York State, which is right here. Okay, so we have the Adirondack Mountains here. We have the Tug Hill Plateau here. The lowlands or plains over here. The Allegheny Plateau. And we have ridge of mountains here and lowlands in between. Okay, and what these different lines mean. A solid line is a major geographic province boundary. This is based on the geography. The dotted line is the landscape region boundary. The state boundaries have a solid line and dotted lines in between. And then the international boundary is very similar to the state boundary, but there's more lines in between. Okay, they also give us a compass on the side, as well as a scale to figure out distance. Okay, so that's page 2 of the Earth Science reference table. Now we're going to jump down to page 3. All right, so page 3 looks a little bit similar to page 2. However, this shows the bedrock geology of New York State. Okay, so if we notice on the side, we have our latitude here that's in the 40s on the side here and here as well. And we are north of the equator, so these are all in degrees north. Along the top of New York State and the bottom is our longitude. Okay, it's going to be in degrees west because we are west of the prime meridian. Okay, so in this part of the reference table, we have different New York State cities throughout. They also show different mountains. And this shows the different types of rocks that are found in New York State and during which era and period they were laid down. Okay, we have mostly sedimentary and metamorphic rock in New York State. Okay, and again, they give us a compass on the side and they give us a scale to figure out the distance. Okay, so for the worksheet you guys are going to do eventually, after you have gone through this lesson, you guys are going to have to use page 2 and page 3 of the reference table to figure out the landscapes and the type of bedrock. Okay, so we're going to move on to slide 14. And this is a very informative video that kind of goes through in more detail how to use both of these pages of the reference table to figure out different things about New York State. Okay, so once you've watched this is about 5 minutes long. You're going to make sure you finish your notes and the check for understanding question. And then you're going to complete the landscapes of New York State worksheet where you're practicing using the landscape page and the bedrock page of the reference table. Okay, so that is it for this lesson.